Vessel just took emotional warfare, wrapped it in haunting vocals and crushing instrumentation, and somehow turned the whole thing into a masterpiece. And a massive thank you for the immense generosity for those folks displayed on screen who get to enjoy bonus perks and benefits as YouTube channel members and patrons. All right then, here we go.
You say you won't begin again. Capitulate and let me in, 'cause I am a fire and you are dry as bone. You are taking your time, you are killing me slow, and I know we instigate, go back and forth, lacerate, 'cause you can remember only when you're alone. I am granting you more than the debt that I owe, 'cause
There's a very, very distinct and obvious reason why I love Sleep Token. And it's predominantly, I mean, there's so many things you could say, right? But it's predominantly the lyrics. The way Vessel writes is so distinct and different from every other artist I've heard. And it just sort of, I prepare differently mentally when it comes to a reaction and breakdown, lyrical analysis, whatever you want to call it. When it comes to Vessel, I know I have to sort of bring my A game, because it's, I'll be honest, there are lyricist songwriters that do challenge me. The top three, which I've said before, are Vessel, number one, Ren, and Faouzia, in that order. That's not to say the other two are not as good. They are brilliant. They are the best in their own way. But Vessel just makes me think that much harder, which is why I tend to struggle and I double check myself when it comes to my analysis with them. But that's why I love them. They are just so, so good, so brilliant. I can tell from the onset that this is going to be a long video. Initially, what struck me immediately is that there is a relationship being portrayed not as some grand romantic tragedy, but as a kind of emotional attrition where two people are caught in a cycle which neither seems entirely willing or perhaps able to just break. Now, when he says, "You say you won't begin again, capitulate and let me in," there is this fascinating language of surrender, right? Where capitulation would suggest that intimacy has become a battle where allowing someone close feels less like an act of trust and more like conceding defeat. And when you go further on, there's this wonderfully elemental image. I am a fire and you are dry as bone. Now, fire needs something to consume, and something that is dry as bone is frighteningly combustible. So there is both attraction and catastrophe, and that's embedded in that metaphor. So Vessel isn't merely saying, "I love you." He's essentially saying, "I'm dangerous to you, and yet you continue to stand within reach of the flame." Then you move on to the next line. "You are taking your time, you are killing me slow." So that shifts the metaphor from combustion to torture, because this isn't an explosive ending, I think. It is a prolonged erosion, the agony of waiting for someone who continually withholds the very thing you need from them. And then we arrive at the admission that makes the entire passage considerably more complicated, right? So it goes, And I know we instigate, go back and forth, lacerate. Now, it seems like a small detail, but notice the pronoun we, because the blame is no longer comfortably placed upon the other person. They provoke one another, retreat, return, wound, repeat. It's all the hallmarks of a toxic relationship. And it's almost as though conflict has become the language through which they communicate intimacy. But for me, at least, hearing that, the most devastating observation is you can remember only when you're alone. Because that suggests memory itself becomes conditional upon absence. When they're together, whatever affection exists is obscured by the friction between them. And it seems like only solitude is capable of restoring perspective. And then finally, I am granting you more than the debt that I owe. So that introduces something almost, what's the word? I'm going to use the word judicial into the language, right? Because there's debts, there's obligation, there's repayment, and then there's balance. And Vessel seems to recognize that whatever wrongdoing exists between the two of them, he is giving them far more than what he believes he actually owes. So what we're hearing is not simple heartbreak. It's the psychology of a relationship that has become transactional, combustible, as well as cyclical, where love, resentment, guilt, and desire have become so hopelessly entangled that neither person can quite determine whether they're trying to save the relationship or merely prolong its suffering. And that, I think, is what makes these lyrics so compelling. There is no pristine victim standing opposite a perfect villain. There are simply two people who appear to know precisely where the other's wounds are, and they keep pressing upon them anyway. So, really interesting. Psychologically, philosophically, there's a lot going on. All right, let's just keep it going.
Sing you more than the debt that I owe. 'Cause I look for Scarlet and you look for Ultraviolet.
Okay, so you're chasing after two different things.
We are exhausted by all this, pretending we just can't resist the violence.
Interesting.
You need the melody, I only need the silence.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But each time we battle the blood and the fury saves us a little higher.
Okay, so there's the actual chorus. There's another thing that I appreciate about them is the beauty of artistry, right? Is there is enough room for different interpretations. A lot of you have commented and given me your perspective of what you've been hearing. And to be fair, most of what I've heard from you lot, it could be that. I'm just interpreting it through my own lens because as Vessel is the artist, he had multiple experiences that have enabled him to write a specific way. Just as I'm nowhere near this type of level, and I don't think I'm ever going to be. But I have my own experiences, which means when I hear a specific thing, as much as I am an empath and I can put myself in other people's shoes, obviously you can't fully fit out that shoe. You can't walk the journey that they have walked. And therefore, your interpretation is going to be somewhat different. But the beauty in their artistry is that there's no clear black and white. There is space enough for the story to be interpreted. However, they do have a very clear meaning and intent that they do want to convey. So this song is no different from the other 7 or 8 that I've done. So yeah, I'm just I'm overwhelmed by the brilliance of Vessel and Sleep Token. I really am. Okay, so now we come to the chorus. I've listened to it 2 or 3 times now, and the chorus is where I think the imagery becomes almost beautifully synesthetic. And there's a few reasons for that, right? So I look for Scarlet and you look for Ultraviolet. So that's telling me that these 2 people aren't merely seeing the same relationship differently. They are searching for entirely different wavelengths of experience. So there's a few reasons why I think that, right? Scarlet is visible, it's visceral, it's earthly. Ultraviolet, by definition, exists beyond what the human eye can ordinarily perceive. So perhaps one person is looking for something tangible, something blood warm and immediate, whilst the other is searching for something elusive, almost imperceptible. And that makes the next line, "We are exhausted by all this pretending." So that feels like the moment the facade finally cracks. They've been performing some version of normality and perhaps pretending that this destructive pattern can somehow be sustained. And when both of them evidently know the truth, it's brilliant writing. Then comes this extraordinary admission, right? We just can't resist the violence. And I don't think that necessarily needs to be understood as literal physical violence. It can be the violence of arguments, emotional provocation, the irresistible collision between 2 people who have discovered that conflict itself has become intoxicating, you know? And I get the feeling that they don't simply suffer the chaos, they just keep returning to it. And then, moving on, Sleep Token gives us this wonderfully revealing contrast. You need a melody, I only need the silence. Now, there's almost an entire relationship contained within those 2 lines. And again, there's very clear reasons why I think that, but you're more than welcome to tell me your interpretation. But for me, one person needs expression, sound, reassurance, perhaps the emotional architecture of music itself to make sense of what they are feeling. And the second person, the other person, wants absence. Not another explanation, not another argumentation, but just silence. And it's 2 fundamentally different methods of coping with emotional turmoil. And yet the final image that we see brings them together in the most tragic way. Each time we battle, the blood and the fury takes us a little higher. Now that's the title, right? That is the title lurking in the language, higher. But what should ordinarily suggest transcendence becomes something, in my opinion, far more sinister, because their escalation becomes elevation. Every confrontation pushes them into a more heightened emotional state. And there is almost an addictive quality to that ascent, right? The blood, the fury, the conflict, all of it becomes a kind of terrible propulsion. And musically, I think that idea is fascinating because the chorus itself feels designed to embody escalation. The language moves from color, which we heard earlier, and then perception into exhaustion, then violence, and then finally the sense of rising intensity. So what we're witnessing here is a relationship in which destruction has become strangely transformative. They may be hurting one another, no doubt, but in that heightened state, they also seem to feel more intensely alive. And that perhaps is the great tragedy of this song, Higher, that these two people may no longer know how to distinguish intimacy from conflict, because somewhere along the way, the battle itself has become the very thing that makes them feel connected to each other. Okay, let's keep this going. Okay, very traditional type of rock. Waiting for the metalcore to come in. Oh, that's a great vibe. I have been reading books on interpreting runes. In the future, I probably will try and... See, now it's that type of stuff. I have to think a lot harder than I do with other artists, because that's not very clear cut. The language, it just flows in such a unique way. And even the timbre of his vocal, it's communicating a feeling that it's... You know what? Give me a second. Yeah, this is definitely going to be a long video. You see, the song here begins to peel away another layer of its emotional armor, and it's revealing a relationship built upon both yearning and profound mistrust. So, with all that you believe, you still refuse to shelter me. Now, that is fascinating, because when you think about it, right? Shelter implies safety, refuge, somewhere to put down one's burdens. Yet Vessel is denied that sanctuary for, well, the very reason of the next line. I am a danger. So there is a painful self-awareness in that admission. He recognizes that whatever tenderness he seeks, it may be inseparable from the damage that he carries. You're a long way from home, so that deepens that sense of displacement. This person is vulnerable, isolated, and one among many. So that makes him somehow utterly alone in this. Then comes the next line, I hate the way you look at me when I'm not understood, which feels almost unbearably human, right? There is a particular anguish in being looked at but not truly being seen. When someone observes your behavior without comprehending the wounds or motives behind it, we understand that. But once again, we return to you can remember only when you're alone. So that's reinforcing that absence, which seems to grant this person the clarity that proximity somehow destroys. And then the final line, I'm granting you more than the debt that I owe. So that returns us to the language of obligation. So Vessel believes he has already given beyond what he is required to give, yet he remains emotionally indebted. So what I'm hearing is not simply a plea for understanding, it's the confession of someone who desperately wants refuge whilst simultaneously believing himself unworthy of being sheltered. And that contradiction is what makes this passage so poignant. He wants to be understood, but fears that. And he fears it because if he ever truly was understood, the other person might finally understand why he is dangerous to love. Okay, so I'm guessing this is going to be the hardcore metal instrumental, right? Okay, not that hardcore, but I'm going to listen for what 2 does. 2 is mad. And then Vessel just going with his vocalese. Freaking L2. Go on, son. Is there a video of 2 drumming? I'd love to watch that. Like, see that? That was ridiculous. Bro drums like an octopus. We're back in the chorus. Resist the violence. Contrast of characters and the story building is outstanding. The debt that I owe. That was more of a true pitch scream. Okay, that's definitely false chord distortion, 100%. Okay. Lyrically, that song was just absolutely enchanting. The music was outstanding. And, I mean, it's Sleep Token. What more do you want me to say? This song is outstanding. That repetition at the end, it feels ritualistic because you won't begin again. Now, it's no longer simply a statement. It's repeated, I think, 4 times. And it becomes a verdict as though the possibility of renewal is being systematically extinguished with every repetition. And then we return to the chorus. But it feels, now I feel like I'm hearing it differently. The Scarlet and the Ultraviolet imagery that we heard earlier, the exhaustion, the irresistible violence, the opposing needs for melody and silence, all of it has become cyclical, as though these 2 people are trapped inside a pattern they understand perfectly and yet remain incapable of escaping. And the thing that I love, right, is that repetition of the debt that I owe. It's, again, particularly striking because the phrase becomes almost incantatory. And it's stripping away its original context until we're left with the obsessive weight of obligation itself. So the questions that I am asking as a listener is this a debt owed to the other person, to the relationship, or perhaps to the consequences of everything they've done to one another? And we aren't given a comfortable answer, and I think that's the whole point. I think it's deliberate from Vessel. And going back to the music, the repetition can transform language into texture. And here it feels as though the words themselves are becoming a psychological loop. The relationship has ceased to move forwards. It just simply circles the same wounds, the same conflict, the same unresolved account. They keep ascending emotionally, but they aren't necessarily going anywhere, right? They're simply climbing higher inside the same cycle until the fury becomes indistinguishable from intimacy and the debt becomes something neither of them can quite ever repay. So, see, I had to deep that song a little bit more than usual because I wasn't entirely clear where it was going upon face value. But I'm glad I took as long as I did to react and analyze this. It got my brain working, and that's why I love Sleep Token. I really, really do. Vessel is a phenomenal songwriter. Okay, well, I could go on a little bit longer, but I think I'm going to leave it there for now. Folks, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for supporting this channel. As always, folks, if you could please like, comment, share this with a fellow lover of music, and please do subscribe if you haven't already. If you would like to support the channel in a financial way, you can do so via the links in the description. My Buy Me a Coffee, Super Thanks, PayPal, YouTube channel membership, all of the links are in the description below. As always, I will see you next time. Please do be kind, be gentle, be respectful to one another, and help each other out when you can. And I'll see you lot in the next video. Take care. Cheers.